think about how poorly we manage people around us. When somebody does something wrong, we blame them. When somebody does something right, poor leaders take credit for those things. And so now how motivating is that really going to be for the people that are around there, especially the people who are looking for the recognition? They may not want the spotlight on them, but they want to know that they're appreciated.
You are listening to the Mindful Business Security Show, brought to you by Focivity, where we answer your questions and simplify information security for small businesses. Get the clarity you need to focus on the things that matter.
Hello, hello, hello. I'm Accidental CISO, and you are listening to the Mindful Business Security Show. Business leaders spend a lot of time and energy managing people within their organizations. But managing people isn't as simple as just telling them what to do. Leaders have to worry about culture, retention, professional development, performance. Recently, we've added mental health to this list. It isn't uncommon for IT and security professionals to suffer from burnout in their careers for a myriad of reasons. And when they burn out, it isn't good for them or the organization. Today, we're going to talk about humanely managing team members in IT and security teams. As always, be sure to subscribe to the show and share it with your friends. You can find us in your favorite podcast app. My guest today simplifies execution through internal and external customer communication. He has spent over 30 years in a wide range of roles, from operations to customer success to executive leadership. These days, he's a fractional executive, consultant, speaker, trainer, coach, and podcaster. You can find his podcast, Find My Catalyst, on YouTube, Spotify, and Apple Podcasts. And pro tip, he believes whiteboards are the path to better communication. Welcome to the show. I'm excited to have you here today with me, Mike Simmons.
It is awesome to be here. Thanks.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to this. This is a great topic. And we've had some conversations kind of behind the scenes about some of this leading up, and that's got me even more excited for it. So, but first, as a fellow podcaster, I love to hear what other folks are doing. What is Find My Catalyst, and who is that for?
It's really for anybody who's looking to create change. And I have worked with student athletes and I've worked with senior executives. If you are looking to create change, one of the quickest ways to do it is to find a catalyst for change, a spark, a nudge, something that helps you move forward. And I do that in the context of people, process, and tools. So systems, people, process, and tools. And specifically in the context of leadership, operations, revenue, and execution. So if you are someone who is looking to create change, you want to simplify your approach to getting things done, you'll likely find something interesting there, in the context of leadership, operations, revenue, or execution. Now, my wife gives me a hard time. She's like, hey, that's too broad. And it's really hard for people to figure out what is it specifically. So specifically, if we look at just my background, I've worked in air operations for United Parcel Service. I worked in, so people who load and unload package cars. I've been fortunate enough to spend a lot of time on the sales and success side of things, both in individual contributor and executive leadership roles. And way back in the day, I would say I flipped burgers, but at Burger King, we didn't flip burgers. We just put them on a little grill rack and they'd move through and they'd cook. So what I've realized over time is humans are humans. The challenge is figuring out which human you connect with best to start learning, thinking, and acting differently. So I think it's for everybody if you're looking to change. If you're comfortable doing what you're doing and you don't want to change and you don't want to do the work, then it's not for you. This is hard work. It's simple, but it's also hard.
A change is one of the most difficult things about management. I run into that in my consulting a lot when we're trying to implement security programs, new controls. I mean, controls are just safeguards, but those are not just technical things, it's processes. And a lot of it's people driven, and getting people to change behaviors as you're implementing the programs is very hard. I know a lot of your consulting, is heavily sales focused and that sort of thing. But I imagine there's a lot of those concepts that can be turned inward. And it sounds like a lot of your work actually is internal in the company, not how they interface outward, but how they operate internally. Do you have any favorite tips for small business leaders to just help them support internal initiatives and make them successful when they're trying to implement major changes in their orgs?
Yeah, it's really interesting when you start to look at it through the lens of customers, right? So you have internal customers and you have external customers. And when you think about customers, customers are people you either support or serve or help create success. So support, you're kind of helping move them along when things come up. You serve based on some kind of reaction. You create success, you help lead them, you help them move forward. And when you look at leadership, my view on leadership, my mindset, attitude, belief, clarity, definition is leaders build leaders, leadership starts with self, and leadership is how we move forward. So when it comes to the internal versus external customer perspective, if you look at everybody through the lens of customer, you'll find that a lot of the things you do apply in the other context. So look at your experience, your background, and ask yourself this: am I more comfortable with external customers or internal customers? If I'm more comfortable with internal customers, start to apply that thinking to your external customers, and things will start to become more clear. You're going to be able to design process to help achieve things. If you're more comfortable with external customers, take a look in the mirror, reflect, shift things around, and apply that to your internal customers. The people that are part of your team have goals, they have objectives, they have aspirations, they have things that they'd like to achieve. Your customers externally have the same kind of thing. Figure out what problems you can solve for the folks inside, and then start working on that specifically. The most important piece, though, in all of this is don't try to do too much. Start with one. If you've struggled doing 10 things over the course of the last year, shrink things down. Let's do one thing really well, demonstrate success, build your own specific process, your own system, and then go and apply it to the next two, maybe three things. Those would be my big pieces of guidance.
I love that. The building momentum is so important. That's one of the things that I learned from a VP that I worked for several years ago. And, the just finding opportunities for some low-hanging fruit to start to build some momentum, get some wins under your belt, get the team rallied and realize, okay, this is the direction we're going, is just, it's so important. And I had never considered that before. And I was, kind of studying him and how he worked. He was somebody that I really looked up to and respected as a leader. And I was very, kind of young in my management career at that point. So I studied him a lot. And that was one of the things that I took away from him. And you take a very people first approach to leadership. That also really resonates with me. Were there things in your personal professional life that influenced that as you were putting together the pieces for your leadership philosophy?
Yeah, so I back in the day when I was at UPS, and that was on the air operations side. I had a leader who gave me a book called Managing from the Heart. And the reason why the leader gave me that book is because I had a leader that was on one of my teams cry in the middle of the air operation because of the way that I handled the situation.
Oh no.
If you've ever watched the beginning of Castaway, they do such a great job in that movie about showing what it's like in an air operation. And that's for Federal Express. But at the beginning, they show a package moving all the way through and they show the importance of the clock. And in that kind of operation, everything matters. Timing is so critical. If the plane doesn't block on time, there's risk downstream in the rest of the system. So I was always thinking about the kind of the ones and zeros or the packages that were moving through things, and the people that were able to move those packages ended up being endpoints who moved things around through the system. And I really didn't care about the people part of it. And as a result, created more stress than was necessary in that kind of operating environment. As I talk through this, you can hear, wow, Mike sounds very robotic. I am. Like it's very systems process. Things have a place, things move around, ones and zeros. That's what makes things work. On the people side, it can work. Context is more important. And everybody has their own version of their kind of process and things that can work through. So you start to look at standards. So the Managing from the Heart book was a good one for me to see, but I was young enough that I didn't really embrace it. I got the signal, but I didn't really embrace it. It took a number of different iterations where I would join different companies or stay too long in companies or wasn't clear about what I wanted, or even just looking internally and saying, "Hey, what is it that I enjoy doing?" And the thing that I enjoy doing is helping people do the things that they want to do better and faster. And a way to do that is, if you think about like a motor coach gets something from one place to another, that's what a coach can do. A coach can help you move things from one place to another. It's not about me as the coach, it's about them as the person who's doing the work. And if I have too many controls in place and get myself into a situation where everybody's dependent on me to make a decision or me to solve a problem or me to communicate something, we're in a lot of trouble. We won't grow as quickly as we can. So you provide some structure into the operating system, some standards so that resources are applied properly. And when you do that, it's amazing what your people will do, especially if you create the space for them to be creative and do it. Because if they're doing things that give them energy, which ideally that's what they're doing, they will run through walls to get those things done. So it's taken a very, very long time. Heck, I'm 51 now. So I started at UPS when I was in my late teens, started leading people in my early 20s. And yeah, I'm still working on it. I'm still working on getting better. I mean, even the internal communication in my family, I had my wife said yesterday, she said, it is so hard to communicate with you.
Oh, that's funny. Yeah, and I like how you use the term operating system. And I know a lot of folks in IT and security, that we'll be talking about here soon, they think of operating systems as software on
Sure.
computers and those types of things. But an organization is a system and it has to have an operating system as well. And just thinking about that, just using that term may help folks just flip that switch in their head and think of the organization as a system a little bit differently, and that they need to have an operating system as well to then support all of the workloads, as we say in IT, that are going to be done. So I really like that term.
Yeah, think about it. So what does an operating system do in a machine? What does it do?
It's the sort of the basic fundamental hardware that controls everything that comes in, everything that goes out, and it manages the resources and the work that the computer's doing.
So imagine if you had that same kind of setup or that structure for yourself, personal operating system, which I have mine, which is the game plan, personal operating system. You had it for your sales team, revenue operating system, which is a dare to grow model, or you had it for your business operating system. All three of them are ultimately taking stuff, in this case, wetware and humans, plus hardware and information and data, and making sure that the right things happen in the right order to optimize for efficiency across the system to achieve the result that you're looking for. And there's a number of things you need to know. One, you need to know what kind of result you're looking to achieve. Another thing you need to understand is what's the load, that what's the capacity for each of the different components of the system. How do things exchange from one place to another? How do you use those resources properly? Do we know where all the conversions are? When you start to shift your mind around this, it's amazing how you start to see things. You start to actually see the matrix.
It's a really great way to look at it. And you had mentioned something else when you were talking about managing people and kind of what it is that they want. And I think that's something that's really important because I want to drill into that a little bit too, because it's not exactly it's sort of incentives, and managers have to be very careful with incentives to make sure that they're aligned with what they want. You incentivize the wrong things, you're going to get the wrong behaviors. But I think also when we talk about IT and security folks, specifically, these fields are known for having a high prevalence of introverts. And, it makes me think like they may have different wants and needs than other folks as well that managers need to be in tune with. What are some things managers maybe should keep in mind? Maybe not specifics about what to do, but more approaches to how they can figure out what do my people need, especially if maybe they're, folks that are on the spectrum or, other neurodiversity situations where maybe their needs are a little bit different than other folks in the business.
So we can go super deep on this. You're going to have to keep me on the rails as we go through it. But so a couple things that we want to do is first let's have some definitions, and I'll share my definitions around introvert versus extrovert. The way that I understand it, and I'm introvert. I'm an introvert. The reason but I play an extrovert when I'm out in the field or when I'm on stage or when I'm at events. I have to really get things up, and then I go back into my hotel room and I crash. I'm out cold and I have my resting heart rate super low. I get really good sleep because of all of the energy that it takes. So, um, an introvert is for me is someone who gets energy, re-energizes by in areas where they're alone. They can be in a quiet space. They can be with their thoughts. An extrovert is someone who gets energy being around a lot of people and are around a group of folks. You might have a slightly different definition, but those are the ones that I'll use for context. So, one of the things I want to look at in that instance is first, where does the person that I'm working with, the human in the loop on this thing, where's the person that I'm working with? Where do they get energy from? What do they get energy from? What builds them up? What sucks the life out of them? When we understand that, then we can start to determine how do we change behavior. So one of the companies I've had a chance to work with in the human factor risk space is a company called CySafe, and we're focused on that eighth layer of security, human factor risk. One of the things that we did that was unique there is applied behavioral science was integrated into all of the work that we're doing that we did as an organization. There's a behavior science model that comes out of research out of the UK, and I use it today. I'm not working with that organization anymore, but I use it today to help get an understanding why behavior isn't changing at that endpoint or that human level. The first letter in this model is C. C is capability, knowledge, skill. Does the person have the knowledge? Do they know what to do? Skill, can they do it? The second letter is O, opportunity. Do we set up the operating environment right for them to do it? Do we keep dumping more stuff on their plate? If so, we're getting in the way of them being able to change. Are we changing things all the time? If so, we're getting in the way of behavior changing. The third letter is M, motivation. Do they give a crap? Like, are they actually motivated? And this is where you get into some of the incentive type stuff. Like, are they internally motivated? Are they more motivated by recognition? Is it compensation? Is it exposure? Is it something? Is it learning? Whatever that thing is. This is COM-B, COM-B. If either of those first three letters are missing, the research showed behavior change was near impossible. And I've noticed when looking at humans that I'm working with or the people that I'm working with, first look at it and say, that first one is the most simple one to do. Do they know what to do and can they do it? I am not built to dunk basketballs. I am built to run over things and create damage. That's how I'm built. So I may know what it looks like to dunk a basketball, but I don't have the skill set to do it. Opportunity. Many times people will use something like a whiteboard and you get all these checklists and you have all the to-dos. And if you keep adding more, the risk of being able to do something or change becomes really, really hard. Or you go through some training and then everybody goes back into the operating environment and someone says, well, yeah, I know that's what they said in the training, but here's what happens in the real world, like all of that kind of stuff. So there's that opportunity piece. And then that third one is motivation. If you can assess against all three of those, and I do that in order, then you can start to figure out, okay, what's the lever or dial that I need to turn or push or pull to help change behavior? That is how you can get much better at helping the people that you're working with get better at doing the things that you would like to see them do, or determining maybe they're not the right people to do those things. Incentive is only one part of it.
And that all really aligns just with my own personal experience with times that I was the most, frustrated or felt the most anxiety in my professional life, where I was asked to do things that I didn't feel prepared to do, didn't exactly have the right support from the organization. Like you said, it was and other duties as assigned sort of situation where, there was all the day-to-day work that had to be done too. So the path wasn't cleared to really make it possible to put the time and effort into it. And the motivation wasn't necessarily there either. What motivates me isn't necessarily always money. And I had leaders like, they'd throw money at people. That was always the first thing they'd want to throw at folks. And, that wasn't necessarily what I was looking for. I was looking for, opportunity to learn and grow, but to also, I was motivated by doing good work. And if I couldn't put a good quality output out there, like I didn't want to do it and do something I wasn't going to be proud of. So a big motivation for me was just pride in what I did and being able to step back at it and be like, yeah, I did that. I did a good job on that. And it's not really about anybody else, but just how I felt about my work.
Think about how poorly we manage people around us. When somebody does something wrong, we blame them. When somebody does something right, poor leaders take credit for those things. And so now how motivating is that really going to be for the people that are around there, especially the people who are looking for the recognition? They may not want the spotlight on them, but they want to know that they're appreciated. I've really struggled with speaking in front of groups of people until I finally got this kind of that spark, that catalyst that said, ooh, this is actually pretty cool. When you start to see nonverbal feedback from people in a group and you have conversations with them around how the content is having an impact, that's really powerful. It helped me overcome some of my fear of having a spotlight on me. I still don't like a spotlight on me. I get uncomfortable when I get recognized, but I also, in the background, when I'm ignored, I feel frustrated because I don't think I was appreciated or given credit for doing different things. I think the challenge is getting out there and asking your people, what do they want? What would they like? How do they like to work? What are their preferences from both a communication perspective, a workload perspective, an area of the operation that they're working in? And that was the next thing I would suggest to any leaders out there who are leading teams, whether it's self or leading teams of teams. Make sure you ask more questions. You get better information through the questions you ask than the answers you give. Everybody around you is paid to nod their head and say, yes, you're wearing the most amazing clothes in the world. Ask yourself this question: am I wearing clothes?
When I was first getting into consulting, my friend whose consulting company I was helping him build, and he had prior consulting experience, uh, said something about, consultants lead the clients to the answers. You don't necessarily have to know everything. You don't have to prove how smart you are. It's more about asking questions that lead them. Generally, they know the answers, and that's something as a leader, especially somebody who's coming from an individual contributor, fingers to keyboard, a doer, moving into management is stepping back and letting your team know the things and just asking them the questions to pull it out and get them to come up with things on their own. And I wish that somebody had told me and explained that to me years prior, because when he said that, it clicked for me with consulting. And I realized like that also goes into management, because when you're a leader, you have to be more of a consultant for your team in a way, so that they're still the ones coming up with the answers and doing the work, and you're not overshadowing them. You want to give them the confidence that, okay, this was our idea, not just from a buy-in standpoint, but just from a growth and confidence standpoint, that they had these ideas. It wasn't the managers that just told them to do it.
And the dirty little secret is they're the ones who are actually out there doing the work. They're the ones who have feedback coming to them all the time. They're the ones who are going to be in a better position to guide and advise and share. So give them the space to do it, and you'd be amazed at what they'll be able to create.
And you talked about your personal operating system the last time we were chatting. And before we jump to my last question here and get to the callers, I just want to have you just talk a little bit about what the personal operating system that you've developed. And are there ways that maybe managers or leaders in small businesses can help team members apply some of those concepts, teach them about that and apply those concepts in their life and in their work?
In the spirit of there is nothing new except what has been forgotten, some of this is not going to be new to folks, either because it may be something you remember now as a result of this, or it might be the first time that you were exposed to it. And there are a number of different ways to get exposed to this type of thinking. The game plan is all based on the whole idea of kind of beginning with the end in mind, which is a Covey thing. So you first you identify your goal. What's your objective? And there has to be a level of clarity around what that goal is. So you can apply SMART goals to this. So we have an objective, and let's just say it's SMART. And you can look up the SMART stuff and figure out that acronym if you're not familiar with it. When we've got a goal, then the next thing we do is we work backward and we say, all right, to achieve the goal, we need to do certain actions. And those actions can be bucketed into what we would call strategy. So we have a what goal, we have a how strategy. What I recommend there, a three-pronged approach to your strategy. If you're trying to do more than three things to achieve that goal, there's going to be a risk that people are going to be confused. There's going to be a risk that there's going to be waste. There's going to be a risk that you're not going to be able to get enough data to determine what's working, what's not working, and where are we stuck. So the second stage is understand the how, or what I would call the action buckets. The third phase is to start nesting in tactics, the things you do on a daily, weekly, monthly, maybe even quarterly basis that align with the strategy to achieve the objective. And what I suggest is no more than three by three modeling, no more than three tactics pieces of work that you do either on a daily, weekly, or monthly basis, depending on what the type of work is. And that daily, weekly, or monthly work ends up being your checklist for the day. And if you are able to knock off each of the check marks, the metrics, the tactics, so this is the M piece, you're able to check off those metrics. Now you've got data that will show you, did you actually do the work? Because here's the shocking thing. If you said you're going to do the work and you didn't do the work, it's not the work's fault that you didn't achieve the goal. It's that you didn't actually do it. But if you do the work and you've got the data to show that you've done the work, then you can reflect and say, am I actually getting closer to my objective? And you apply this in 2-week sprints. So 6 2-week sprints equals a 90-day piece of time, so a quarter. You take your goals, your actions, your metrics, build them into 6 2-week sprints, and over a 90-day period, you should be able to move closer to the objective that you're working toward. I use this from a health and fitness perspective. I use it from a family finances perspective. I use it relative to the business. The things where it starts to get more complicated is you add more people into it, and that's where you get into like the business operating system pieces.
Yeah, that's a great explanation, because I think a lot of folks, they get in a hurry and they know they need to do something and they just start doing things, but it's not in a controlled way. It's not strategic. It's just, we're just kind of flailing at stuff. And I know people have said I need to do this thing, so I guess I'm going to do this thing. We haven't gotten to the why. We haven't gotten to exactly how we're going to rein this in and what we are going to do and what we're not going to do, and set that sort of expectation then of repeated focused effort as well. So I really like that.
If I can add one more piece to it, the thing that ends up happening is you'll have your checklist, your daily checklist relative to the goal, and those are going to be the things that you're going to be focused on. And there's going to be other stuff that's going to come up during the day. You're going to need to take care of those. But at a minimum, take care of the things that you put on there, the checklist that you align with your strategy that hits your goal. What typically happens is people build out a checklist and they just keep adding more to it. And before you know it, you've got a list of 20 things that need to get done. And typically the thing that you go after first is not the hard thing that's aligned with the objective. You go after kind of the easy thing that's right there, or the thing that you enjoy. And what ends up happening is you look back at the day and you say, hey, I was really busy, but I didn't get anywhere.
It's not a good feeling either. You manage to optics, manage to, whoever's the loudest, whatever's the most urgent, and all of a sudden those strategic things just fall away and they don't move. Before we jump to callers, if you could wave a magic wand and have every small business owner or leader instantly understand one thing about leadership, what would that one thing be?
That leaders build leaders.
That's really good. All right. So we've got callers lined up here with questions about humanely managing IT and security teams in their businesses. You ready to go to the phones and take some questions from callers?
I can't wait.
Awesome. Let's go.
Do the cybersecurity risks to your business have you confused? Visit Focivity.com/podcast. That's FOCIVITY.com/podcast and sign up to be a caller on a future episode.
Our first caller on the show today is Alex from LA. Hey, Alex, welcome to the show. How can we help you?
Hey, thanks for having me. So last week I had to riff half of my team for budgetary reasons. This is a team that I poured a lot of time and effort into. I hired each of the members and gave them their first shot in security. I trained them, and I really cared about their trajectory. And I wasn't given really any choice in this except for who to keep. And I'm just wondering, like, how do we as leaders help this to suck less?
It is super hard, and there really isn't a way to make it suck less. So it sucks, and I'm sorry that you had to go through it. I've been through it on both sides, both when people have been riffed around me and where I've had to reduce force. A couple of things that have helped me in the past, and let me know if these are helpful, Alex. Number one, the team knows. So on your side, know that the team knows based on the way that you did your hiring that you are committed to them, you're committed to their success, and you built a team in the manner that you wanted to build this team. So they're a part of the team. Unfortunately, decisions get made, and those decisions are necessary in order to have the business survive and have the customers who you support their businesses survive. So it's hard. That level of clarity can be helpful. The next thing that I would like to do, especially in the instance where I needed to riff people, was, and that sounds horrible, but in that instance, it's getting a really good understanding of what they want to do next, what their capabilities are, and where they're the right fit, so that I can start to help them find that next opportunity. The go in and here's how you can update your resume, and then these are all of the places to go do job posting and all of that kind of stuff is not super useful right now. They feel like check the box type items. They are check the box type items, and they don't feel very good on the other side. So anything you can do to lean on your network, help get an understanding from their perspective of what good fit is, your perspective based on the amount of time that you've worked with them, and your knowledge of people in the network, and make those connections happen. Because there is somebody, given everything that's changing in security, there's somebody out there who's looking for someone with that capability. See what you can do to help them find that. Is that helpful at all?
Yeah, totally helpful.
And just a couple of thoughts on that too, for especially for business leaders, the business owners or the more senior leaders too, is when these kind of events happen, they're really, really difficult. And it's easy for people on the outside to say, well, this was a failure of leadership to have to lay folks off. And for those leaders, it's important that they are transparent and vulnerable in this as well. And the vulnerability piece is really comes down to a lot of times to compassion. I remember one riff at a company that I worked for, um, where I was the IT person, and this is another thing too with IT and security people specifically is we know what's coming. Oftentimes we're brought into confidence ahead of time and we can't say anything. As professionals, we cannot. And that weighs heavily on them to know these people on the team in other parts of the country are going to get let go. They have no idea it's coming and I can't talk about it. I can't warn them. I just have to be a professional and keep it to myself, and that is hard. But also, I've seen where this blew my mind. The leadership had a director riff a big chunk of his team, like he was about half of his team, and then that afternoon riffed him. They made him lay off his team first and then let him go. And that was just cruel as far as I was concerned. So I think there's compassion goes a long way from a leadership standpoint and just being open and honest and transparent about the situation and just remembering that you're dealing with people and their livelihoods and that they're not going to know exactly what to do next. Like there's this kind of deer in the headlights thing, and who knows what they've got going on in their personal lives. There's a lot. And so laying people off by email or just locking their accounts and then they find out because they can't log in. There have been a lot of really inhumane ways that those are done. And I think, leadership needs to really give some thought to how are we doing this and making sure that the people, even though we're letting them go, that's that's a business decision. It's not like a personal performance thing. It's not like this isn't a punishment for them, and but it's still something that's going to greatly affect their lives, and it's just so incredibly important. Hopefully that's helpful. And then Alex, I think you mentioned you had a second question you want to ask.
Yeah, that was all super useful information. I was wondering how I can best support the people who remain as well, because obviously it was a large rift and there's a lot of uncertainty now.
That piece that was just discussed around the empathy and the communication and the transparency and the vulnerability piece, which is be honest about kind of what you're feeling, what you've experienced, and where things are next. The couple of questions that I would have if I'm part of your team is this the only one? When is the next one that might happen? How do I know? Like, some of those kind of things are gonna go on in folks' heads, and anything you can do to share your perspective based on what you're able to share with the team is going to be really important here. What you're doing is you're setting some expectations. You're explaining or sharing that you understand the current environment, and what folks want to understand from a leadership perspective is, how are we moving forward? Like, what are the expectations? What are the standards? Where are we going to go? And everybody has a different view of the situation. Some may be a single income, maybe the primary income for their family. Some may be independently wealthy. Some may be something else. Everybody's going to look at this a little bit differently. So do a combination of both: the group setting the expectations with a high level of clarity, making sure that everybody understands what was said and what was heard is aligned, because that's the only way that it'll be remembered. And then take some time one-on-one and ask questions, not share more information. Ask questions and get perspective from each of the people. That's what I would recommend on that side.
I think to the approach, because everybody's going to be thinking, how are we going to get everything done? We just lost half the team. We got to keep the lights on, and we had project work. Obviously, it's not all going to get done. So how do we know what's going to give, what's not? And I think as managers and leaders, there needs to be those conversations and alignment within leadership, and to acknowledge to the team, look, we're not going to expect the team to get the same amount of work done with a fraction of the people, whatever that fraction is. And one of the things that I really have recommended and pushed for when I've been in that leadership role, helping through this process, is the first thing to focus on is the keep the lights on stuff. Do we have the capacity we need to do this? Can we keep things going, just the day-to-day maintenance operational work, and look at how much of the remaining capacity and skills and stuff, like, do we have the right folks? Do folks have the right knowledge? Because a lot of times in rifts, there's no handoff, which also really sucks. And so you kind of have to rally the troops. Very like, do we know what needs to be done? And what questions do we have? And have those honest conversations. And then once you get the day-to-day keep the lights on stuff kind of handled, figure out, okay, what's the capacity next now that's available to continue keeping projects going. It's not realistic to lay off a big chunk of the team and expect the same amount of work is going to get done. And so leaders have to be prepared to do the hard work, and it is hard work, the prioritization of what are we going to do? Like, what have we committed to? What have we committed to that we're just not going to do now? How are we going to communicate that to others? And I've seen too many times that folks get laid off, and leadership, they don't want to go to the customers and tell them, we're not going to make these commitments to you. We need to renegotiate that. And instead, they just want to push on the remaining team. So that's a really, really important part, that, management makes the decisions. They're going to have to do some of that hard work to prioritize. It's not on the team members that are left to prioritize that work. And too often they want to push that down and be like, well, you guys just have to prioritize ruthlessly and just figure it out. It's like, no, no, no. That's on leadership now to reset priorities after that when you have a fraction of the team.
Yeah, I pushed back and told my leadership that there would be no doing more with less, and that we would have to reprioritize. Absolutely, for me to be okay with it. Great to hear. Thank you both.
Thanks, Alex. Appreciate you coming on the show. And our next caller on the show is Tyler from Iowa. Welcome to the show, Tyler. It's great to have you here today. What kind of questions do you have for us?
Yeah, hey guys, how's it going? Just really wanted to know, currently dealing with where there's a lot of these migration efforts, right? Consolidating a lot of businesses that are a part of one large business, and a lot of these are involving moving things that have resided in heritage data centers, right? And whatever policies and that tied to those, it's become quite the list of escalations on a daily basis for everything feels like priority number one, right? We're already have a huge effort going on the side, and then oh hey, by the way, we got these 10 to 15 requests that you guys need to handle yesterday, right? Otherwise the business is going to fail, right? And it's hey, as a leader, I try telling my guys, right, like hey, I try to protect them as best as possible, but how do I? I can only try to make them feel good about it so much before it's like it is what it is, guys. Apologies, and I'll try to make this better going forward.
Tyler, a question for you. Is there clear decision-making criteria for the team around like this over that, or how decisions will be made when new things come through?
I wouldn't say it's very clear, Mike, but I would say it's much. Hey, this is new priority number one, right? Is what we're told. So it's not. It's hey, we're already behind on this, so this is your new priority number one.
I mean, the thing that's really hard is to make decisions when there's a lack of clarity. Like if it's really, really foggy, they're going to take on additional risk. I think making sure that everybody on the team understands what risk we're taking on, both across our peers, up inside the organization, and then down as we're working with our team. If we're going to have new things that keep coming in, then anything we can do to have clear decision-making criteria will help in the situation. In the absence of clarity around decision-making criteria, then the next thing I like to ask there when that new thing comes up is over what other thing that we already have on the schedule. So asking the manager or the person who's asking for the thing to help with that prioritization, because things will happen in the business. The challenge that we run into as leaders is our priority, and we try to make it everybody else's priority. A really cool visualization for this that's helped me in these kind of situations is this an above the water line thing, or a below the water line type thing? If it's below the water line on a ship, it's an emergency. We've got to take care of it. Because if we don't, we're at risk of sinking. If it's above the line, then we might have a little bit more flexibility and we can kind of push it off. And that kind of visualization can help in that environment.
And burnout can come from a lot of different things, but some of the kind of common patterns that I've seen is it's not just purely there's a lot of work, and that you didn't take a vacation or something. Burnout is something that's cumulative over time. And so if you're looking at, kind of protecting your team in these situations where just there's never ending flow of work, because, in businesses, there is a never ending flow of work. There's always more work to do. But to keep this cumulative sort of injury from happening, because burnout sort of is a PTSD style injury, things that kind of cause that I've seen is when people, they don't feel prepared for what's coming. They're, constantly being surprised so that they have no idea what they're going to need to do any particular day. It can be really difficult for folks. Or they don't feel prepared in that they don't have the skills, or being asked to do things that are pushing them outside of their comfort zone. And yes, growth happens outside of your comfort zone. And when I see that infographic about, the comfort zone and growth zone, that kind of stuff, there's another circle that's always missing around that. And that's it. When you push people outside of that next circle, though, that's where you're doing damage. And it's not just about growth anymore, but you're pushing too far, and you're doing damage. So managers need to watch to make sure that if they're pushing folks out of their comfort zone for growth, they're not going all the way into that damage area. But also being heard is another one, being appreciated is another one. If management is ignoring the team, saying, "Hey, we're really struggling here. This is too much. What should we really be working on?" Like, and some of these may be weak signals that the management isn't picking up, that the team is starting to get anxious, with simple questions. You're trying to be professional, you're trying to be polite, and not, come off as, as flippant or adversarial with leadership. And they may miss those weak signals at that point that, this is a problem. And a lot of times folks that burn out also, in my case, at least, my work ethic was a part of that. Like, I did part of it to myself because I wouldn't speak up. I just grit my teeth and try to get it done. Leadership needs to notice when they have folks in their teams who wouldn't say poop if they had a mouthful of it. As my uncle always used to say, I don't know where that phrase came from, but like, if you got people that never speak up about their needs and all of a sudden they say something, it's quiet, it's not real firm. It's like, hey, I'm kind of nervous about this. It's a weak signal, but that should be interpretive. Like, wait a minute, this person never says anything, and if they're saying something, like, I need to pay attention to that. So yeah, pushing folks, not supporting them, they feel not appreciated. It just this is what you have to do, and the constant leaning in, and it never gets to a place where there's light at the end of the tunnel. It can definitely lead to burnout, and this happens especially with folks that are neurodivergent, folks on the spectrum, ADHD, other things. Like, they may not always be real great at voicing their needs. And so trying to stay in tune with that is really, really important to preventing burnout, is just listening to those weak signals. It just keeps coming back to that for me.
No, thank you. Thankfully, my guys aren't afraid to stand on their soapboxes and make me aware of their concerns. Right. So yeah, it's something I do to, hey, I take them aside, address it, make them aware. Hey, I'm here. I do care. Right. It's just this is what we're dealing with right now. Right. So for my next one, this is something kind of coincides with the original question, right? Just the sheer volume of the requests and that we're having to deal with and escalations on a daily basis. A lot of times, as engineers, we see, oh, hey, this request has telnet in it. Right? Why is that something we want to allow into or out of our data center? Right? It's 2025, everyone, but we've been told, hey, well, this is a like for like migration. Nothing we can do about it. Just yep, just put it in, right? Like, at the same time, we do make sure cyber is aware and accepting that risk, right, up to the top level. At the end of the day, it just doesn't feel right as a security professional and knowing everything we know about the industry, right? How can I help these guys understand that, hey, yes, this is unfortunate, but it's something we just have to do in the interim.
I'm going to defer to AC on that one just because the technical nature of it. So
For listeners that may not be aware, Telnet is a pretty old protocol now. It's been around for decades and decades. It's used for managing systems, remotely connecting in, typing commands to the systems, getting responses back, but it's not encrypted. It's not a secure protocol because it originated at a time when there was a lot of trust in the network. And if you were on the network, like, there weren't that many people on the network. If you were there, you were supposed to be there in the very early days. That's kind of how security got looked at, and Telnet came out of that. And so doing a migration and keeping an insecure protocol like Telnet in a system like that's a pretty big miss from a security requirements standpoint in a project. And I think that's really where this backs up to for this one, is preventing business leadership from overriding security concerns when you're executing migrations. These are projects, and I think the time to get that stuff worked in was at the beginning phases of the project cycle. So it's kind of a cultural problem where the company culture doesn't look at security as a first class citizen or first class concern. So it's not something that's being thought about in the very early stages of project planning, as folks are looking at what are the requirements for this? What are the acceptance requirements for it? What are our compliance requirements? What are the risks to this project? So I think this one is one that is less that an individual manager can do themselves, and this is more something that's going to have to be a bit of a grassroots effort from below to get support and to try to communicate with others in senior leadership that are working on project plannings and initiatives to make sure that security is included from the very beginning of those processes instead of trying to bolt it on at the very end. That one's a lot harder, and it is one of those things where the security folks, the IT folks, when they know that's the wrong thing to do and their hands are tied, like they feel helpless at that point because I can't fix this because now I'm being instructed explicitly to do this thing, and that's going to cause a lot of anxiety as well because they know that this is not a secure protocol. They know this shouldn't be there. They know that that should be replaced by some other protocol like SSH or something now. So I think explaining to folks, sometimes we got to align and execute. Unfortunately, even if it's not the most secure way to do it, maybe it's how do we put in a change order for this to maybe get it updated in the project, or maybe we put a change control thing and put a second project in immediately following the migration that says, okay, now we're going to come back and we're going to fix these things that were outstanding. Because at the end of the day, if it's already there and it's been there probably for a very long time, another week or two with this migration, that's not the hill to die on from a security standpoint. Like I would be then looking at if we can do a change order and do it right during the migration, great. But otherwise, when can we get this prioritized, get it on the risk register and let your risk management process run and let leadership own the risk on this and the risk decision and not the individual contributors or the line level managers.
Given AC's response, the thing I would add on to this is know how decisions are being made inside the organization. What are the priorities? So anytime that someone might make a decision that I don't agree with, or I think is creating additional risk for us as a business, what I attempt to do is reframe the decision in the context of what's important to them. And that what's important to them might be guiding principles that we have as an organization, or it might be core values that we have as an organization, or it might be an objective that we've laid out as an organization. If I can tie that to that, like we want to reduce the impact of X, then we may be in a position to rethink that piece before the work is done to move it and then have to remove it again. So that context, sometimes, I know this is going to be shocking, sometimes leaders make decisions without accurate information.
Agreed. No, great feedback, both of you. Thank you. And then I only had one more, I think, right? From it's AI automate everything, right? That's the way the business wants to go because move fast, don't break things. Like, okay, you only get one. You only get one of the two. What is the best way that as a leader and of a team? What's the best way that I can help prevent AI or automation from overruling certain security requirements or controls, right?
This is one that I think is super interesting. And in fact, I'm tired of a lot of the noise out there as it relates to AI and all of the things that are out there. Dreamforce is going on currently, and Mark Benioff was out there and paraded a couple of executives out in front of the group to talk about how everybody is using Agentforce in that instance. That is going to create so much noise in the market about how do we do this, or when can we do that, or whatever. Here's the question I would suggest asking, Tyler. What is the specific job to be done of this thing? Like, what is it that we need to accomplish? What's the task that needs to be accomplished? If you can't clarify the task, you have no right to apply some kind of tool or system to start doing that at scale. So let's be really clear about what the task is. And it's going to be hard because everybody will have a vision or an idea, or they'll see somebody else do something. But if you can't clarify the specific job to be done and break it down, deconstruct it into small parts, then we're taking on additional risk as a business. We're taking on additional waste as a business, and we're taking on additional things that might ultimately impact the business. So I want to understand what the specific task is. And then the second thing I want to understand is, does it make sense for an automation to take care of that task? Like, do we know it enough? Have we worked the process out enough where we know that this is repeatable based on some kind of testing and feedback? Or is it something where we need the human to continue to take care of it? And so now you start to figure out, does the tool enable the human to do better human things, or does the tool take on that job and create space for the human to do something else? If you don't understand the job to be done, I don't know why you're throwing a tool at something. And then if you haven't gone through some kind of decision making criteria, then I don't know why you're taking on more. I don't know if that's helpful.
Yeah, no, that definitely helps.
Yeah, something that kind of a pattern I'm seeing with AI. Business leaders, like, we know how to do strategy. We have governance already. We know how to come up with business initiatives, align them to our strategy, figure out what our requirements are, and execute this stuff. Like, this is business school MBA 101 kind of stuff. But with AI specifically, it's happening so fast in the industry that business leaders know we need to be doing something with AI, or like at least they feel like we need to be doing something with AI, or we're going to get left in the dust. And we have the folks in maybe the technical teams, the early adopters, who are starting to do stuff with it. They're starting to understand it. They're starting to use it. Maybe they build a proof of concept. Say, hey, I made this thing, and the business is like, oh, great. Can we do this? And next thing you know, it's in production. And it was one of those things where they pounced on an opportunity to jump on kind of a little skunkworks project that maybe somebody did as a side project to experiment with something, and it's gotten pushed to the forefront. But we don't have governance around AI specifically. And one of the things that I think as leaders and organization, we need to make sure that we've got an AI policy in place. If it's just for using AI tools, at least an AI use policy in place, and name an AI officer, an executive stakeholder who's the AI officer, who's going to be that business executive level person who is responsible and accountable for how the organization's implementing AI. The other piece of that is making sure that your AI policy doesn't duplicate all the other governance you already have. We already have governance around how do we control access to stuff. We already have governance around how do we track our assets and our inventory and the data that we have and those types of things. At least we should. And so we don't want to reinvent the wheel when we already have policies around other things that they still apply to AI. It's still software, it's an application. But where AI deviates now is when we get into decision making authority, kind of as Mike was mentioning, do we have a human in the loop for certain things? What are acceptable uses for AI? What are not acceptable uses for AI in the organization? Those kinds of things. And then if you're developing tools, some guidance that doesn't duplicate everything in your SDLC, your software development lifecycle policy, but stuff specifically for AI with, what are we going to do to protect our training data and our weights and those types of things? What are we going to do to make sure that we're controlling for bias and those kinds of things in what we're doing with AI? But if you don't have any of that stuff to start with, you have no framework now for anybody in the organization to hang any decision on. And everybody is shooting from their hip and running full bore. And, it's one of those move fast and you're going to break things for sure, to kind of use the comment you made early on. So with my clients, I've worked with a couple of them in the last couple months to put together AI policies to help govern how they're going to use AI. And both of them eventually will get to developing AI, but right now they're just trying to figure out how we're going to use it as a tool, and we'll expand on that. So I think that's one of the biggest ways that you're going to be able to keep them from overriding security concerns is to get that policy, have a stakeholder at executive level who sponsors this policy. It's signed off. Executives agree that this is our policy for AI, and now we need to follow it. And like I was mentioned before with project management, we got to make sure that those requirements are included from the beginning, because once you get into the implementation stage and the horse has left the stable, so to speak, it's going to be really, really hard to put it back in. AI is one of these things. It's going to be like authentication. If you screw up how your application, your system handles identity, authentication, and authorization, that's really hard to fix after the fact. And AI is going to be another one of those things. If you screw up, it's going to bite you bad, and it's going to be a lot more work to go back and fix it.
There's a model out there, the role reflective model. It's something that I use with working with organizations when determining, do we want to put data into systems or start capturing certain data. And the model is this: what? So definition. So what is it? What's the definition? So what? Why does it matter? Now what? What are we going to do with it? And like just forcing some of these extra questions help to create speed bumps in the decision-making process inside the business to help identify where potential risk is. Is this the thing for us to be doing certain things with? Is it not the thing? Is it a lot of risk? Can we use this as a way to learn? But use these models that what, so what, now what, and then add in things like 2x2s to help with decision making. And you can identify where you're comfortable adding additional speed and where you're not comfortable adding speed. Hopefully that was helpful, Tyler.
Yeah, for sure. Like, thank you very much, guys. Appreciate the time today. Great feedback, and look forward to trying to use some of these going forward. Thanks again.
Yeah, thank you, Tyler. Appreciate you coming on the show. Great questions. Next caller is Stacy, the raccoon from cyberspace. Welcome to the show, Stacy. It's great to have you. I've never had a raccoon from cyberspace on yet, so this is a first.
There's always a first for everything, yeah. So just to give a little bit of context about myself, I am in an individual contributor role. I'm a senior solutions consultant, but I do have a certification in cybersecurity leadership. So, and previously also had my own podcast for cybersecurity leadership. I was a co-host. So on the topic of layoffs, since many IT and InfoSec teams are being faced with major uncertainty regarding aspects like sudden layoffs and budget cuts, for example, how can leaders maintain trust and morale when they always can't guarantee job security? And have you found that there are sufficient ways to prevent your team members from getting laid off whenever the cuts do happen?
If you're not the person making the decision, it's really hard to prevent the decision from being made. So that's one of those where you've got to give yourself a little bit more, maybe a little bit of grace and say, hey, there's not a lot that I can influence here. Some of the things that you can do to influence is be really clear with communication around what people are working on, how that's impacting the major objectives inside the business. If you're a publicly traded company, you can look at your 10K and see where all of what the major initiatives are that are being driven by the business. And if you can connect to those, you might be able to create more time and space and context, because sometimes people will look at and make decisions based on a spreadsheet and they won't have the additional context. So that's one way to help prevent or avoid or create some additional space between a decision that's going to be made when you're not in the room and create some extra space there. Relative to the trust piece, this is one that's hard because it doesn't happen in a single point in time. Now, trust can be absolutely betrayed in a single point of time. Over time, you build it up. And I look at trust as the combination of awareness, what's happening, and confidence that is going to happen. Confidence that can happen. So trust is one of those hard things. The way that I do it and the way that I attempt to do it is I am what I am. I don't communicate differently with different people on the team. I let people know how I communicate and they see it over time. They can look in my eyes when we're communicating something so they know that there is caring and that there's heart associated with what is being shared. And as much as there's this balance of what we can share and what we need to hold true to ourselves, like AC had said, relative to on the professional side of things, how you have access to certain information, be transparent with what you can share. And if people ask a question on something that you can't share, say that you're not in a position to be able to share that information. Don't mislead, don't misguide. So build it over time. Be careful about the risk of losing it or having it disappear because of a mistake, and one of the biggest mistakes that happens is when someone says something to someone but doesn't say it to someone else, and then those someones are all talking to each other, and they realize everybody's getting a slightly different story from the people inside the organization, and then the question is, who's actually got a handle on the wheel?
And being able to having a track record with your team of being able to have the uncomfortable conversations candidly and honestly and respectfully and fairly. Like if you have that track record and that trust that you've built, like Mike said, like that goes a long way, because then when you're being open and honest again, and maybe a little vulnerable. I've told people when I've had to let folks go in layoffs that I've been very honest with them about the decisions that were made and how the decisions came about. Now, in those particular cases, I was not the final decision maker, and I've let them know I was very upset with the way the decisions came out. One of the things that Mike mentioned earlier in the show with folks that have left is offering to help them find their next thing. If you need a reference, let me know. Just those simple things. Like if there's anybody in my network that I know that I can put them in contact with that is hiring, like I still care about them. It's not like I'm just sweeping them out the door. That goes a long way. As far as being prepared, the second part of your question, that's really hard to do if the layoff catches you by surprise and you're not already maintaining these things. But having documented a snapshot of what your team does, the value that your team creates in the organization, the work that they're doing, who's doing that work, basically kind of trumpeting your team to get that visibility, because a lot of work that IT and security folks do is completely invisible. And if it's not seen, nobody knows it ever happened. And the only things they ever notice is when something doesn't work right. So having that documented, what the folks on your team are doing, what they're bringing to the table, how they're contributing to success, that kind of stuff is one piece of it, but also having a skills matrix for your team of these are the skills that are required by the business and our existing workload and projects and operational stuff, as well as maybe a skills matrix for upcoming stuff that is on the roadmap, to keep that up to date. And then another matrix of who in the team has those skills, where those skills are. Because if you can show this to others in leadership, if you're not the one making the final decision, and they can see, if we lay off these 3 people, we're going to have these skills holes in the team. And those are critical skills for these other things that are really important. And just having that information available, that's something that not a lot of managers do. I learned about in justifying hires. How do I justify that I need somebody in the team when the question is, well, do we have enough work to keep them busy? And I would try to argue that no, that's not the right question. The question is, do we have the capabilities that we need in the team to achieve our objectives? And keeping somebody busy isn't the reason we hire them. We hire them for the value they're going to create for the company. And so that's when I started trying to document skills matrices and that kind of stuff in my team. But it is handy for layoffs. And I have been able to use that documentation with management to not just help prevent people on my team from being laid off, but also to fight for raises and salary corrections for folks on the team as well, to prevent voluntary exits when I know somebody's got critical skills and critical background institutional knowledge and they're being underpaid. And it's like, okay, I go to HR, I say, look, here, we need this person. Here's how they fit into the puzzle. And where we're paying them versus where the market is right now, we're at a high risk of losing those folks. And this is going to hurt us and it's going to cost us this. And it's hard to put a dollar amount on that sometimes. Sometimes we have to just come up with loose estimates, but like if you can at least give them some information, understand like this, it costs a lot more than that extra 20 grand that we're trying to bump their salary if we were to lose them unexpectedly.
Thank you. That answers that question really well and is a great segue to my next question. I didn't mention earlier, I actually do work in cybersecurity education. And so that skills matrix, I won't mention my job. This isn't ad or anything like that. But we do have things like that, such as like if you're on the defensive side, you can look at how the different skills that you have related to the training that you've done maps to the MITRE ATT&CK framework across the different tactics and techniques. My next question is actually very related to the topic of skills. So, what are some creative ways small and mid-sized organizations can invest in professional growth, even whenever budgets are tight like they are right now?
A big thing for me is having a clear framework that we use. And I've got two that I think through: mindset, skill set, tool set, in that order always. So mindset, attitude, belief, clarity of definition around what the thing is that we're focused on. So in the context of security, what's our attitude, belief, clarity of definition around what security is? And then what are the skills that align with that so that we build those skills? And then what tools do we need to bring in to help create leverage? Because a tool without skill is not super useful. So that's one piece: mindset, skill set, tool set. The other thing, when it comes to building the skills specifically, learn, take in the information, think, reflect on how it applies to what you already know, relates to what you already know, and then take action. Because if we don't take action and reinforce the learning, it will get lost. There's a curve in the learning and development space called the Ebbinghaus curve, or excuse me, the forgetting curve from Ebbinghaus. And if we're not putting the skills into use, we'll start to lose those skills. Think about riding a bike, or thinking about ice skating, or think about any of the.
I can't do either of those things, but continue.
Yeah. So those physical skills, if we don't use them for a period of time, we start to lose them. So first we will understand mindset, skill set, tool set. Then we look at learn, think, act, and we can kind of organize things and say, what are the pieces that we need to move along? And then to get into this value equation piece, how does the organization perceive the value of that capability inside the business based on what you're trying to accomplish? Once you have those pieces together, you can start to get a higher level of interest in investment, both from the endpoints perspective, the end user, and from the leadership perspective. And if you get both of those together, then you can start to get into a situation where the learning will happen, the learning will be reinforced, and it'll be more about capabilities that you're building inside the organization and less about time, or less about the cost and some of those other things. What do we see as the return?
Honestly, from my experience, small businesses or organizations in general offering things like tuition reimbursement and those kinds of things are actually surprisingly cheap to offer, because not many people really take them. And the ones who do are the ones that like that they're self-selecting, telling you like this is somebody to support because they're putting in the effort outside of work to drive and build their skills. So if the organization can afford to experiment with tuition reimbursement, like that's a huge, huge thing that not everybody takes. So it, and you probably could find some statistics out there about what percentage of the workforce in the organization in a given year is expected to use these benefits, and estimate kind of the, statistically the estimated cost of offering that benefit, and it's probably not going to be quite that much, again because it's very few people spending a few $1,000s a semester. Short of that, there's a lot of training platforms online that have just massive libraries. These SaaS platforms have massive libraries of content for all sorts of skills development. It's not just, security stuff. It could be IT, it could be business, it could be sales, it could be anything. And these libraries are great, and they're not terribly expensive, because once they've created the content, the incremental cost to selling it over and over and over again to subscribers is pretty low. So you may be able to sign up for one of these platforms for $20 a month per employee, really cheap when you think about, the general overall cost of doing business and what it potentially costs you to not continue to develop your people. So that works well. LinkedIn Learning, there's stuff you can get through there as well. And conference is another one, and this is one that I've seen over and over again. I've experienced this myself as well with organizations that don't want to support folks that want to go to professional conferences. Blue Team Con in Chicago, for instance, I just attended recently. I talked to folks there who basically say, I'm here on my own, taking PTO to be here because I want to be here. I want to learn this stuff. And that was me several years ago as well. The company didn't want to support things like conferences, but that's a great way to support folks. And even if the company can't pay for the whole travel, paying for the conference ticket, that may save them anywhere from $100 to $500 or potentially more, depending what the conference is. Maybe you can't cover the travel, but maybe you cover the ticket and tell them, don't take PTO, just go. And at least let them go to the conference, learn this stuff, and not have to charge their PTO for it. And when they come back, don't make them do a presentation for the team and that kind of stuff. Like especially if they're paying for it themselves or the bulk of it themselves, let them go and develop. If they want to share with the team what they learned, they will. But that's another thing that's kind of a drag. If you've taken the time to and paid out of your pocket to go to something like that, to then come back and have your employer expect you to give a report, to put in more work, to do a presentation to your team, to then educate the rest of the team, try to get something for free from you there. So that's always something that bugged me, and huge recommendation I have.
Well, thank you. That explained a lot of it. I really appreciate the thoughtful answers.
Yeah, thank you, Stacy. It's great having you on the show today. I appreciate your questions. Good conversation. So, Mike, we've had 3 callers today. Any final thoughts? Closing thoughts? Anything you want to leave our listeners with? As we're wrapping up the show here.
Lean on the community. Lean on the people around you, even though, well, heck, I'm talking to somebody who has a handle, an avatar, even though there are some people who will be behind a handle or behind an avatar. In fact, many of those people will want to share and will want to share information. You can hear in each of the questions that everybody is dealing with a different version of some of the same things. How do you communicate up inside an organization? How do you communicate across inside an organization? How do you communicate down inside an organization? How do you understand what the human on the other side is actually thinking, feeling, saying, doing? Like when they do things and they say things, you can start to get an understanding, but you still don't see what's happening in that space between their ears. Ask those better questions. You will get better answers. One thing that I didn't mention on that personal operating system thing that's really important to remember is build your own. So you take a framework and then build on it, make it your own, because that system that's made of both a combination of process and tools will be more useful based on your specific capabilities. And you can't reflect on what you're going to do. So do the work, have the conversations, and then when you get the information, validate and retest that the things are working properly, specifically on that communication piece. Remember, there are things that are said, there are things that are heard, and there are things that are remembered. And it's hard for all 3 of those to come together, because what ends up happening, especially in my family, I start talking and they hear Charlie Brown's Teacher. And before you know it, the things get lost. We experience this. So sometimes it's important to have somebody else in the team share the information, because it's a different voice, or a colleague of yours in another organization share some information. So work together. But once something is said, ask this question: what did you hear me say? And some people will get defensive about it. When somebody says something to you, share back with them what you heard them say. And that will help solve for one of the biggest challenges with communication, is the belief that it actually happened. Like, let's make sure that what was said was heard, because if those 2 things don't happen, it's really hard for it to be remembered. Don't overcomplicate it. We're simple beings, even though we continue to do really incredible things. Learn from each other. This is a fascinating conversation, and many of the questions that were discussed apply, whether we're talking about security, we're talking about learning and development, we're talking about emerging technology, we're talking about operating inside the business. Remember, you're a human being. Be more human in the way that you interact with folks.
And humanizing it is so important too, as leaders, recognizing that other folks in our organization, especially the individual contributors who aren't senior folks with years and decades of career experience, may have trouble framing the thing they're trying to communicate in business terms. And they're really smart with all the technical stuff, but taking that and turning that into something that connects directly to the business in a way that the executives are then able to actually take that and make it actionable for them may be difficult. And so as a leader, talking to those folks, asking them, maybe catch them later after the meeting or after whatever it was. And if you're a mid-level manager or something, if there's something that that your boss or your leadership's not understanding, and one of the guys on your team or gals on your team like really knows this stuff, get them to connect and have the upper level person. And this is one of those areas with leadership where there's this power dynamic that is in play as well. So the more senior person, if that leader goes to that IT or security professional and says, hey, the thing you were talking about yesterday or last week is like, I didn't really fully understand all of this. I understand enough to know that this is important and I need to understand more. Do you want to go grab a cup of coffee? I want to talk about this some more and see if you can help me understand this more. Just that connection, like now that person feels heard, they feel appreciated, they've been humanized in the process. Like, so that's going to fight the burnout and feeling like this is an unwinnable thing, but it's also going to help leaders understand some of the technical stuff. So, you have that opportunity to learn in the process, but just pulling them aside and be like, kind of one-on-one, informal, it's not a status update or anything like that. It's just, hey, you were talking about this thing and I want to know more about this. Teach me about this. I know it's important. So much of this comes down to communication within the organization.
It's okay to say, I don't know. Like when the conversation turned into Telnet, like I was not familiar with Telnet. It would not have been good for me to try to answer something like that. So as leaders, don't feel like you have to know everything. Once you think that you know everything, well, heck, I'll use another quote of mine that's a favorite. It's not what we don't know that gets us in trouble. It's what we know for sure that just ain't so. And that's a Mark Twain quote. Like, it's amazing how assumptions will jump in the way. So, AC, thanks for having me. This was awesome.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for coming on the show. Where can folks find you online if they want to follow up and ask you questions, follow you on social media, that kind of thing? Reach out for consulting, whatever. Where can they find you?
Yeah, so you can find your catalyst at findmycatalyst.com. That is literally the best place to go. And from there are a couple of links to go a little bit deeper, like work with me directly. You'll see some of those things there. The social media links are all there. Find your catalyst at findmycatalyst.com.
Perfect. Folks, Mike is so good at this stuff. Like his approach is just amazing. And we need more folks like him helping leaders lead effectively and humanely in their organizations. And listeners, I want to thank you as well. Thank you for listening to the show. We do this for you. It's a passion project. I love doing this, and I appreciate that you are here listening, and I hope that this was valuable as well. Lastly, I want to thank Michael Coburn for the amazing theme music for the show. I am Accidental CISO, and until next time, stay mindful.
Don't miss our next episode. Be sure to subscribe in your favorite podcast app and follow us on social media. Visit Focivity.com/podcast. That's FOCIVITY.com/podcast for show information and links to our social media pages. This has been the Mindful Business Security Show, brought to you by Focivity.